If your home is getting viewings week after week, but nobody's made an offer and you've got a date you've got to be gone by, are you forced to slash the price or sell it cheaply to some company to get it sold in time? Well, that is the question a couple with a garden flat in East London asked me this week, and the answer may have saved them something between £100,000 and £200,000. So in this video, I'm going to share the conversation we had, including how many viewings it should actually take to get an offer, the 2 fast sale routes we ruled out and why, and the 8-step plan we built to get a sale like this one done by their deadline. So Daniel and his partner, that's not the real name by the way, weren't actually in trouble. They just wanted to know whether they were on the right track because the clock was ticking. So here's where they were. So a 3-bed ground floor garden flat in London. A newer build with its own private garden and a nice long lease. They bought 4 years ago for around £925,000. Hold on to that number because it comes back in a way later on that kind of surprised them a little. It went on the market at around £1 million, and after the first few weeks, they trimmed the price back to below that level. Since launch, they'd had about a dozen viewings, including a couple of second viewings with more forward booked in the diary, but 0 offers. And then there's the deadline, which kind of came with a bit of a twist. So they're leaving in around 3 months to travel. They didn't actually need the sale money in order to go, though. They just didn't want the sale hanging over them, dragging on and distracting them while they were away. So Daniel's real question wasn't why isn't it selling? It was, should we switch to something faster or something more aggressive before the deadline arrives? So let's take the quick sale routes first, because a deadline like this always drags those options into the conversation. So first up, we've got house buying companies, sometimes called kind of cash buying companies, we buy any house companies, and so on. Now, I ran my own house buying company for years, and I competed against nearly all the major players, so I know exactly how they work. So a genuine company only pays around 80% of the market value. Their whole model is a conveyor belt. Buy below market value, resell quickly, and repeat. The discount is the price of that certainty. And so on a flat at this price, that means giving up the best part of £200,000. Now, for a seller who absolutely needs to exchange in like 3 weeks and can do nothing about that deadline, this might genuinely be their only option. But Daniel had 3 months until they leave, viewings every week, and no financial need to sell at all. It's just an expensive and unnecessary shortcut in this kind of situation. And I see it as my job on these calls to look for the reasons you don't have to use one of these companies and give up all of that cash. And here there were plenty of reasons. One warning while we're talking about these house buying companies, though, because it catches so many people out still. Some of these companies claim they'll pay 90% or even 95% of your home's market value. But when you see an offer like that, it's always one of two things. Either it's a high initial offer that quietly drops late in the day once you're committed, or they're not really buying the property at all. Behind the scenes, they simply go looking for a buyer, the same as any estate agent would. So that route came straight off the list. The next route sounds more respectable, but it hides a similar trade, and that is auction. So sellers typically walk away with about 10 to 15% less than their home's full value when they sell at auction. On this flat, that's £100,000 to £150,000, and you lose so much at auction for 2 pretty simple reasons. So first, most people can't buy at auction or just don't want to, and so there's way less competition. And secondly, the buyers who do go through the process are typically doing so because they're looking for a bargain. And so for me, the deciding factor with auction is usually if a home is unmortgageable. So if a lender won't touch a property or it's really a development project, auction can be exactly the right route for it because investors are the realistic buyers for it and they're comfortable bidding there. But this flat was mortgageable, livable, and ready to move into for anyone. So the normal market was still its best route. Auction would just shrink the pool of people allowed to bid on it. And there's a nastier risk hiding underneath auction as well that it's worth being aware of. So at this price level, the rental sums don't stack up for investors, and there was nothing to renovate either, extend or convert, no options like that. So there'd have been a real chance it simply didn't sell on auction day, and buyers can see a failed auction on property's listing history, and it plants that question you never want in your buyer's head, which is what is wrong with it. And so it makes auction this really risky option. And so with both fast sale routes off the table, we could finally deal with the question kind of hiding beneath the deadline, which was how many viewings should it actually take to get an offer? because this is the number that kind of changed the mood of the call. And it's important because I've been selling properties through estate agents for 15 years, several hundred properties sold for clients, more than 100 of my own as well. And before we go fixing stuff in a sale and changing things, first we want to ask if anything's actually wrong yet, or if we just need to give it more time. And so to help with this, here's a number I've seen repeated over and over throughout the years, and I've tended to find it roughly hold true for us as well. So you should typically expect to get around one offer for every 7 viewing, which means a dozen viewings with no offers is not crazy. It's kind of like just flipping a coin and getting heads 2 times in a row. It feels significant, but it isn't. And so for me, it's more like if we were getting 20 viewings with no offer or 25 viewings, then I'm starting to think something's wrong. But at this level, dozen viewing, the numbers aren't telling us something needs to change. And in my experience, when that is the case, if you get to that kind of level, 20, 25 viewings without an offer, it's usually the photos or the description that I look at first. And here's why. So the listing is setting people up to expect one thing, then they show up and it's something different. And that's why they're not offering. So here's the most extreme case I've seen of this. So it was a couple I spoke with last year, 70 viewings with 0 offers. 70. I'm pretty sure that is the highest number I've ever come across. So they were selling a 2-bed flat. And on paper, on the listing, it was fine. The floor plan looked good, pictures looked great, so people were booking viewings. But here's what the floor plan didn't show, and the photographer had miraculously concealed. Bedroom 2 was tiny with a sloping roof, so it was almost unusable. Now, the default in this industry, when it comes to estate agents and property sales, the default is to make the listing look great and conceal the flaws, and that's fine to an extent. The job of marketing is to sell stuff. But think about what was actually happening. The agent was booking viewings again and again from people who want a 2-bed flat. They want 2 bedrooms, and showing them a flat that effectively has 1 bedroom and a big walk-in cupboard meant that none of them were offering. And so the answer there was to fix the listing itself. So we put a shaded area on the floor plan to show the sloping roof, more honest photos of that room, and it meant the next wave of viewers knew what they were walking into, and that's how the right buyer was then found. So when viewing numbers go wrong, it's usually presentation, but it can be the agent or the price as well. And so back to Daniel. So for context, like we've just said, nowhere near that line with 70 viewings and no offers. Not even got 20 viewings with no offers. He's a few weeks in, dozen viewings in, more forward booked in the diary. And for me, in a healthy market, in a built-up area like this one, I typically expect a couple of viewings a week every week. And when we're getting that, we tend to end up selling somewhere around our asking price. So the viewing numbers are telling me this sale is fine. Don't do anything rash, give it a bit more time, but it leaves one more thing to rule out, which is the market itself. So if you are worried about your local market, let me show you a check you can do yourself, like right now in about 2 minutes. So we looked at his competition on Rightmove. So we looked at similar 3 beds within half a mile in a price band, a bit, some distance either side from his own. And there are around 20 similar properties. Now, by toggling the Rightmove button to hide and show the properties with sales agreed, we could see that sales have been agreed on 2/3 of his competition. 2/3, right? So we run this quick check all over the country, and we typically see anything from about 10% to 50%. It is a pretty blunt tool. It's not perfect. Local agents can game it sometimes, but it's proven to be really useful over the years to just take a quick temperature of the local market and see what we're going to be selling into. And so 2/3 is about as healthy as a local market gets. And better still, most of his competition were flats, and the flats were selling at an even higher rate. So buyers were actively buying flats like his within half a mile right at that time. And so the flat was never the problem. It just hadn't met the right buyer yet, which means the job wasn't to do anything drastic. It was not to do anything rash. It was then the focus more so should go in that kind of situation. Don't do anything rash, and spend some time buying, removing delays from later in the process. So here is the plan we put together on the call, and it comes in 2 halves. It's part 1 is what to do right now, and then what to do if September arrives, so another month or so go by without an offer. So here's the first half of the plan. So like we said, hold your nerve until the numbers say otherwise. With viewing still rolling, there's a strong argument the buyer's just going to show up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Second, instruct a solicitor now, not when a buyer appears. So the norm is to wait until a sale is agreed, but then nothing happens for 2 weeks while everyone waits on your paperwork and your buyer's commitment drains away and momentum disappears. So get every form returned with your solicitor from day one, and it means that they can send the contract out to the buyer on day one once the sale is agreed. It isn't the norm, but if you're serious about selling, it's just a complete no-brainer and it gets you ahead. Okay, so third, and this one's optional, consider paying for the searches and the leasehold pack up front as well. The local searches are around 250 to 300 quid. The leasehold management pack often about the same. But here's the thing, each one of them can take 2 to 6 weeks to come back. And if you just order them now, everything's ready for when your buyer shows up. And that can pull completion forward by well over a month. There is a trade-off with this. If you haven't found a buyer within about 3 months, some of that money may need paying again. And that risk aversion is why agents and solicitors don't recommend it. So you're not being reckless if you skip this one. But if you are serious about selling and you've got a deadline you're trying to meet, it can be some of the best money you spend. Now for the second half of the plan. If September arrives without an offer, that's when you change things. It's when you revisit your choice of agent and think about changing the listing and consider dropping the price. But I recommend changing them all at once. The reason is what I've seen again and again over the years is, say you do a price cut with an agent who's already gone stale and has already failed to sell the property for the last few months. The price drop can be like throwing a party that no one shows up to. It's like this big announcement and then just crickets. And it means you're often left with the downside of the price reduction, which is less money at the end of the sale, and the downside of doing nothing because the price drop didn't make any more people come and view it. And so we like to make the changes land together. Fresh agent, fresh valuations, fresh listing if needed, any price move, all in one proper relaunch and not kind of 3 little ripples. And in this case, I lean towards adding a second agent rather than just replacing the first one. And that's because their current agent already had a load of sales agreed on the competing flats nearby, meaning that agent is holding a live database of exactly your buyers. They're constantly doing viewings on property like yours as well. And so they have the opportunity to drag buyers around to come and see yours if it seems like a better fit. And you don't want to walk away from that kind of agent, especially when you're only, a few weeks in, or at that point maybe 3 months into the sale or something. And by the way, if you do go with 2 agents, insist on winner take all fee. This is another part of the conversation we had on the call. We don't want some fee splits will be set up so the agent who doesn't sell it gets a third of the fee for their efforts. In reality, you're just promising thousands of pounds to an agent for doing no work. We want a winner take all kind of situation to incentivize them both to actually get on and make an effort and try and sell our home. When you do use 2 agents, expect the overall fee you pay to rise a little bit for it, but in my experience, it is well worth it for the extra viewings and competition that you get. Next, get fresh valuations and pay real attention to the low ones. And I say this having had something like 2,000 plus estate agent valuations on properties I'm working on. Agents have every incentive to value properties high, and they do it to try and win business. So when an agent valuation comes in lower, treat it seriously, because what we've seen again and again is often they're just the ones being the most honest with you. Rightmove's latest data makes the point for me, and it shows how important this is. So I've said for years, if you want to sell your home quickly and for its full value, one of the most important things is figuring out what it's actually worth, because overpricing your home will rarely make you more money. In most cases, it just costs you time. Rightmove's latest data, so July 2026, shows this perfectly. So they say homes right now, priced right from day one, find a buyer in around 36 days. But for homes that need a price reduction, it takes around 127 days to find a buyer. So there is 3 months of your life back if you can just get an accurate valuation from day one. One more idea I discussed with Daniel as well that costs nothing. Go out of your way to put ideas in your estate agent's head. And specifically here, we talked about getting them to cross-sell the ground floor garden flat to house hunters. So a big ground floor flat with a private garden offers most of what house buyers actually want, but it never appears to those buyers who've set their Rightmove search to houses only. So put your agent on the spot and ask them, who have you spoken with this week who's looking for a house but might be interested in ours? This agent, and we check this while we're on the phone, like all of the estate agents, they're spread thin over 100 or more sales. They're not giving your sale much thought. So doing a bit of your agent's thinking for them and then feeding it to them will often shake loose these extra viewings that would never have happened otherwise. Then there is the price game that we've got to play with the estate agent as well. And this is where I watch sellers give away real money again and again. So here is the lesson. Never tell your estate agent your bottom line figure. An agent's job is just to get a deal done at any price, not the price that is best for you. And that means they take the path of least resistance. So if you tell them how far you're willing to come down, in nearly every case, that price quietly gets shopped to the buyers. They say things like, you do know the sellers would take a bit less, might be worth you coming to have a look at that. They say stuff like that. And so a buyer who might have been willing to pay over the asking price now never will, because they already know you'll accept less. And the same, by the way, goes for any concession you're holding back for after the survey. The moment your agent knows there's wiggle room and you'll drop the price if your buyer renegotiates, you're way more likely to end up giving that extra money away. And so the next point here is never list below the price that you'll actually accept. So when Daniel had spoken with his agent and said he wanted to sell fast and get a move on with the sale and stuff, the agent's idea had been to drop the price to offers over 900,000, which would spark a ton of interest and competition. This is like 10% off the original asking price. The problem was that figure was way lower than Daniel and his partner were actually ready to accept. So picture this: someone offers £920,000, 20 grand over the asking price, and it gets rejected because it isn't enough. Now you've annoyed a buyer, the agent's frustrated, and the sale loses momentum because people stop spending time on it. And that can happen very, very quickly. So if you do use this low, aggressive offers over price to kind of force the pace of your sale, you've got to set it at a number you genuinely be willing to take, or it can backfire badly. And on the subject of price, next we had to talk about the number they didn't want to go below. So they paid, like I said, around £925,000 back in 2022, and selling below that felt like a loss. It's completely human, but it's an emotional number, not a financial one. And here's the reframe that surprised them and is probably going to make you feel slightly sick. So we ran that original purchase price and the timings through the Bank of England's own inflation calculator, and you will see inflation has risen around 17% in the last 4 years since they bought. So to truly break even on the 925 purchase price, they'd need to sell at roughly 1,075,000 to truly come out with the same purchasing power at the end of it. So that real break even is already long gone. It's depressing, and that's a whole other conversation about inflation and house prices and so on. But I share it not to just make you feel depressed if you run the same numbers on your property, but I share it to try and be helpful. And the point is, let go of emotional anchors if they're just going to slow you down and force you into decisions that don't make sense. Judge every offer on the facts of the day, not on a number from several years ago. So the last thing we covered is the deadline itself, and I wanted to be really straight with them here. So in July, Rightmove announced that leasehold sales are now taking 169 days to complete. That's once you've found a buyer. So even a buyer found in August means completing in late January. It's agonizing and hard to believe, but it's true. And that makes their early November timeline start looking really unlikely. The reason this is useful information, though, first, setting expectations and planning accordingly. And second, it makes every single week you can bank now even more important. Everything we talked about for saving time in the legal process later. So the realistic plan was simple: get everything moving now and accept that the sale may still be in motion while they travel. And that's where Daniel landed by the end of the call. In his words, more or less, we'll get things lined up as best we can, as soon as we can. What will be, will be. There's only so much we can control, but it's good to know we can speed things up on our end. That's what he said at the end of it. And that's the whole consultation in one line, really. You can't control when your buyer walks through the door. You can absolutely control how ready you are when they do, though. And you can control not making any rash decisions in the meantime. So if your own listing is getting traffic but no offers, here's what carries over from my call with Daniel. So first, count your viewings against the 1 in 7 rule. A dozen with no offer is normal. 25 with no offer starts looking like a message. Next, a deadline doesn't mean a discount route. We Buy Any House companies and auctions solve genuine emergencies when there are no other options. For everyone else, though, they just convert this sort of timing worry into an enormous cost that most sellers just don't need to face. Next, make your changes land together. One wave of interest, big splash, not kind of 3 little ripples that don't move the needle. Next, prepare the legal side before you have a buyer. Weeks banked now are weeks off the end of your sale. And also forget what you paid. Inflation has already moved the goalpost way more than most of us realize. The only question that matters is what your home is worth to buyers today. Now, every property and every seller is different, and the right route depends on what you value most, whether it's speed, certainty, convenience, or price. So, if you're not sure whether your answer is to wait or cut the price or switch agent or a different route entirely, I can help in two ways. So, first, I've designed a free 60-second quiz that asks about your home and your priorities and then points you to the selling method that fits you best. The link is in the description below. And second, while the channel's still small, I'm happy offering this to you since you reached the end of the video. What you just watched was the result of a free consultation. I do multiple calls just like this one with home sellers most days. I do them for free. There's no hard sell, and you can find the link to book one yourself at the bottom below this video in the description. So thank you for watching, and good luck with your own home sale.